Hi everyone, I'm Professor Sally Eaves, Chair of Trust for the Global Foundation of Cyber Studies and Research and CEO of Tech for Good nonprofit Aspirational Futures. Today in this Fireside Chat special, we're focusing in on all things ESG. And I couldn't think of anyone better to talk to about this such an important subject than Nicola Acut, VMware's Vice President of Environmental Social Governance, or ESG. Welcome, Nicola.
Hi, Sally. Hi, everyone. Thrilled to be here, and thank you so much for having me at your virtual fireplace.
Absolutely. I thought that's a good way to describe it, isn't it? Absolutely. A lovely conversational feel. And I know how much we both passionately care about created shared value. And for me, I've been really excited to see all the work you've been doing with VMware around ESG efforts and really making them real. For me, I'd love to hear and share more with the audience about exactly what you're doing and really to kind of bring to life your 2030 agenda, because it super impressed me.
Thank you. Yes. Well, Sally, about almost a year ago, we made a big decision to set out a formal 10-year vision for VMware and the company. And we call this vision our Agenda 2030. And it is really about building a more sustainable, equitable and secure digital future for all. And it is really, think about it as our blueprint to have an impact. And what's really powerful about this is that it is tied to our business strategy and to our technology. It creates that, it's the pathway for what I believe really needs to happen in the future. And that is that all companies bake into their businesses and their business models outcomes of sustainability, equity, and trust. So we're on the journey.
I love that. And it is a pathway. And I love the word you used there about being baked in. I couldn't agree more. Sustainability, I think for a number of years, and ESG more broadly, maybe it's been something a little bit on the periphery. I know we've both been a passionate advocate around this for many years, but it's such a joy now that this is part of mainstream conversation and being truly embedded in business processes, in technology, and that alignment of the different areas, those pillars you talked about together, they come together. It's so important to treat it like that, and it can make such a difference. So I'm delighted to see the work you're doing and that commitment and that accountability around that commitment as well, making that visible. So true. So I'd love to, again, kind of bring to life the uniqueness of what you're doing and how you're also helping and enabling customers to do the same across their ecosystems too.
Yeah. And, that's a really important point that you just made about baking it in, because, what we're talking about today with ESG is not CSR or sustainability of the past. This is a wholly different paradigm around business. And you're right, my whole career has been in sustainability and corporate responsibility. And, notwithstanding the progress that we've made in the past, these topics have tended to be on the side of the business, right? And, and that's kind of how it was. And like I said, not to say that we haven't made good progress, but it's not sufficient. For the challenges of the future, that approach to having sustainability kind of as a pillar or a peripheral to the business isn't going to cut it, given the global challenges that we have. So that's the big pivot here, is to now build these commitments into the business, and to your point, to have tangible goals that are tied to the business strategy. And that's exactly what we've done at VMware.
Absolutely. Exactly. No, I couldn't agree more. And I know when we had a chat previously, I was talking about KPIs and kind of moving from return on investment or ROI to ROSI, return on social impact. And I think you're really embracing that. So I love to see that. I think it's so important. And one of the things, I'm in the UK at the moment. I've just got back ahead of COP26 in a few weeks' time, and net zero. A lot has been talked about that at the moment, building the green economy, becoming really top of mind for any people and organizations alike. It's a real talking point. I think the pandemic's affected that as well, in terms of that pause to reflect at where things come from, supply chains. We've had that opportunity. So I think that's a great to kind of build a contagion of positive change around what we do next. So I'd love to hear more about what VMware is doing around the net zero agenda.
Yeah. So net zero is one of our 30 commitments as part of our 2030 agenda. So maybe let me just give you a bit of context around how we structure the agenda, and then let's dive into that specific topic. So, our framework for the 2030 agenda is really about driving outcomes of sustainability, equity, and trust. And within that, we have 30 goals that we've committed to over the next 10 years. And so within the context of our sustainability outcomes for the business, net zero is a very strategic one, along with, of course, the impact of our products, which I'd love to get to later on in our conversation, especially relevant given that we are talking at VMworld, and this is a very big part of our strategy. But so you asked about net zero, and I absolutely agree that the pandemic has shone a light on many of the challenges, and along with, frankly, the acceleration of climate impacts. And for the first time, I saw an interesting stat that 1 in 3 people around the world has experienced a direct impact of climate-related extreme weather or disasters. So it's becoming real to people. And I think all of that together with what's happened to lead up to COP26 and the recognition of the fundamental inherent risk to our world, of course, and our way of life, our economies, our societies that climate presents, hence the urgency. Now on net zero, right, this is an evolving definition. I think depending on who you talk to, they define it slightly differently. But for us, right, that means taking responsibility for our full value chain, right? So the carbon impacts of our full value chain. So it's not just our own operations, but really our supply chain, as well as our use of products. So I think that's the key piece. And the other part of it is, getting to our goals. We as a company have been progressive in setting science-based targets. And that's a big piece of our strategy, combined with our commitments to renewable energy and carbon neutrality, and driving that our strategy around how do we fundamentally use less, and how do we transition what we do use to renewable energy powered, and then of course mitigating or offsetting the balance with carbon removal instruments, and really emphasizing nature-based solutions, and that is a big priority for us.
That's superb. That is a kind of full life cycle approach, as I would call it. We talk about circular economy a lot, don't we? But that is how we make that real and look at it right across product and service development. But also I love the fact that you were talking about leadership, I would say, in terms of relationship with partners as well. It's kind of using that sphere of influence for good, isn't it? And it has that ripple, that contagion of change effect, as I talk about quite a lot, but it's powerful to see that in action. So I think that's excellent. Thank you. And another thing in terms of leadership is the ESG reporting. Again, transparency, visibility around this is a huge, huge area. I think consumers are increasingly conscious around this particular area, which is great to see. But we need to help people make informed choices, whether it's employees or as advocacy or as partners in a supply chain. We need to be able to see those differences. And so one thing I've noticed that's come out very recently is the new ESG report from VMware, which is great to see. And I'd love if you could bring to life some of the key insights, key findings that have come out from that research.
Yes, I'm glad you noticed it, and we released it just in time for VMworld as well. And yes, right, this represents our commitment to transparency and progress, right? So we're not going to achieve our goals overnight. We know that, but we've set ourselves targets, and of course, we follow some of the leading protocols in disclosing environmental social governance. And that really is the framework for our commitments to transparency. And for this year, it's our first formal ESG report. And what's special or unique here that we're really doing differently is bringing to life the way that as a company, we are helping enable our customers through what we do. So the report is a rich repository of stories from the impact that VMware has had in the distributed workforce, right? Last year, the world turned upside down, and and a big piece of being able to enable business continuity has been that digital infrastructure. So VMware's Workspace ONE and Anywhere Workspace solution has been a really critical piece of that transformation, and continues to be as the world, I think, moves to this future of a distributed work environment. So some great examples of that in the report. Highlights other things I'd love to highlight. One of the things we did last year is, as we look at our carbon footprint, like all companies, honestly, around the world, right? We no longer had people commuting to work, and so our sustainability team really took a leadership role in evaluating the methodology, and we have come up with an approach to complement what we believe will complement the existing greenhouse gas protocol on carbon accounting and reporting, to acknowledge the fact that we need to account for the net emissions. So just because people aren't commuting to work as much, all of our home offices, and at VMware we have 35,000 virtual, global innovation hubs, aka people's home office, like you and I right now.
Absolutely.
But that home office also has an energy footprint, and so we need to start thinking about how do we account for that. And our view from a leadership perspective is that home office needs to be part of a company's operational boundary for reporting. And so my team has been very on the leading edge of this, and has put out a white paper, which, if folks are interested, we can share, on how to start thinking about it and how to calculate that. And net for us at VMware, right, we have certainly seen as a result of the shift and a positive impact on our footprint, of course. But you won't be surprised, Sally, to know that 36% of that home office footprint is IT equipment.
Absolutely.
Yep.
That's a great example there. And it really shows that holistic approach that's needed to look at all the particular items that could be contributing to this. I think that is great leadership. That's fantastic. And the other thing that sprung to mind when you were speaking there as well is the fact that you said, we can't do things overnight. And you're absolutely right. There was some research that came out only about a month ago, looking at consumers' perceptions on trust. And that was ringing through my ears as you were talking there, because what was coming out of that is that people understand that these are kind of complex, messy problems. And what people want to see is transparency. They want to see that commitment to progress. They don't want that to be really accessible and available. And it's understood that you can't do everything, in a day, a week, a month, a year, but people want to see the pathway along the journey and that accountability to delivering that. And people understand that it's difficult, but that's what they're looking for. And trust is built so strongly if they see that happening. It came out so acutely in that research, and it's great to see that you're really embracing that journey. So that's fantastic. I love that. Very holistic. I love that. Fantastic. And maybe that kind of draws on to another question, actually, and kind of like what you see as the next big step. So you mentioned a great example there in more holistic measurement. I also think consistency of measurement as well. So again, as I mentioned earlier, helping people make informed choices. But what else are you seeing potentially in the next step to scaling ESG impact?
Well, honestly, Sally, the biggest next step is for companies to start baking this in, kind of going back to the beginning of our conversation.
Absolutely.
That really is the Holy Grail here. And because until we tie ESG to business strategy, we continue to be challenged with scale. So the scale piece is this mindset shift of thinking about ESG as the strategy that you set, plus the environmental, social governance risks that you manage and opportunities that you accelerate, right? And so when companies can start to see that, both on the risk side, but I'm a big fan of it. I happen to report into the office of the CTO. not by chance, very intentionally. So
absolutely, I love that.
In the heart of R&D, this is all about innovation. And I think ESG is one of the biggest innovation opportunities that is out there, that is there. And so tapping into, how businesses can leverage their competencies to drive impact, that's where scale happens. And that's what I'm really excited about. And I think is really the next step of the journey in ESG.
Could not agree more. That embedding or baking in, absolutely key. More co-innovation as well. I think we've seen some examples of that, across the pandemic, which is a great way of doing things. So yeah, I couldn't agree more strongly with that. I think all these things coming together is exactly where we need to be going next. So that's fantastic. And I'd love to also bring to the attention some of the sessions we've seen at VMworld that have really stood out. So examples with Microsoft, Google, Equinix, SAMA, for example, some of those customer stories about making a difference, that enablement we've been talking about throughout our conversation. I'd love to kind of shine a light on those as well.
Oh, thank you for shining a light. In fact, if folks are inspired, I'd encourage you to have a look at the set list. I put together, and we can again share a link to content at VMworld that's happening this week, where the speakers or the demos touch on environmental, social governance issues. And I'm thrilled this year that there is a whole track on Inspire Change for people to dig in. So maybe I'll just focus on a couple things to highlight. Sally, I had an amazing conversation with the CEO of a company called SAMA, and her name is Wendy Gonzalez. And it was just so eye-opening. Now, SAMA has been recognized as one of the top AI companies in 2021. They've made incredible progress in their business and their business model. But what's amazing about this company is how equity and sustainability is built into their core business. And this is an example, if you want to shine a light on a company that's really thinking differently about their business model with this longer term stakeholder-based mindset. So, it's not just about building great solutions in their domain, but it's about doing it in a way that drives equity. So, for example, they have explicitly made hiring a diverse workforce part of their business model. They actually believe in this idea of that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And so as a result, they have a key part of their workforce based outside of Nairobi in Kenya. And their workforce is incredibly productive. They're building skills that the community didn't have before and creating opportunity for meaningful work, and all the while driving profit. So to me, they're a shining example of having impact and driving profit, so that they're not mutually exclusive. So check that one out.
Oh, definitely. I must admit, I confess I've seen that and I love it. I think it's fantastic. And I've got the words echoing in my ears here is shared value, for one.
Yes.
And that democratization of opportunity. I think they absolutely embody how you can do that. As you were saying, you don't have, corporate for profit on one side. You don't have, social enterprise charity on the other. We can bring these benefits together. You can do well by doing good. And I think they really embody that. And embed it, to use that phrase again, to everything they're doing, and your support for that, I think, is fantastic. So great examples there as well. And it reminds me as well, again, some new research. I always kind of draw on research when I can, but it was talking about like brand love. And it was saying that, people are looking for something different. It's not just about product and service and consistency and experience, although they are obviously all important, but there's one other aspect that's super important too, and that's purpose. And then that's ringing through everything we're talking today. We need all of those elements to come together, not just one or two of them. It's that holistic, the integrated approach to service, isn't it, at the end of the day? So yeah, it's really bringing those to the fore. it probably brings me on to one final question. And I mentioned this, at the top as well. We've got COP26 coming around the corner next month. And I know we'll be talking about that more soon, I'm sure. But what's your personal take on the progress that can be made, at this big talking point at the UN, looking ahead at what's next for all things ESG?
What's my personal aspiration? I think that a couple of things. One is the urgency of now. I think that we are there's no longer time for talk shop. We've got to be a walk shop. And I think that's number one. We have technology, we have solutions. It is now time to, drawing on everything we've said in this discussed in this conversation, to tie these outcomes into both business responsibility, business strategy, and then, of course, from a regulatory perspective, right? So, we've seen quite a shift around the world in terms of reporting. And I think that's a first step, right? Reporting for reporting's sake is not useful, but reporting for driving progress and creating competition. Because at the end of the day, I really fundamentally believe that the companies that will win are the companies that will endure, because they are resilient. They are future focused. They're thinking about, like you said, the connection between human health and well-being, our social structures and systems, as well as well-being and economic development and driving. So in my view, it's about purposeful capitalism. That, to me, that is what it's all about, is stakeholder-driven, purposeful capitalism, because that is the way that we can really change the world and create a more equitable, sustainable future for all of us.
I could not agree more strongly, Nicola. What a great way to round off our conversation. I think I'll make one final point as well. Behind you, all the details about VMworld and that phrase, imagine that. I think all the things we've talked about today kind of show how we can move beyond the imagination to the realization, and your work to support that, I think, is hugely important, impactful, to really make that difference and make imagination real. So fantastic to speak to you today, Nicola. Thanks so much. And I can't wait to continue our conversation and actions around all things ESG very soon.
I love it. My pleasure. And I look forward to the next conversation.
Thank you all for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Speak soon.